Nobody remembered hiring him. That was the funny thing about Danny Kowalski. 8 months on the biggest warship in the Kalori fleet, and not a single crew member could recall when a human had first appeared pushing his cleaning cart through the corridors. The aliens walked past him like he was part of the wall. Their conversations never stopped when he entered a room. They discussed battle plans, secret codes, and personal problems right in front of him because, to them, he simply did not exist. Danny preferred it that way. He was 46 years old, with gray at his temples and hands rough from decades of work. Back on Earth, he had spent 20 years fixing machines at a factory in Cleveland. When the factory closed, he had two choices: find another dying job or take the offer from the Galactic Labor Exchange. The aliens needed workers for tasks they considered beneath them. The pay was 3 times what any Earth job offered, as Danny became a janitor among the stars. The GSV Sovereign Light was home to 4,000 Kalori. They were tall beings with silver-blue scales and proud faces. Their civilization was old when humans were still living in caves. They had accepted Earth into the Galactic Compact 5 years ago, but they still looked at humans the way a professor might look at a child who had wandered into a university lecture. Danny cleaned their floors. He emptied their waste bins. He wiped down their fancy computer panels. And he watched everything. Tonight, he pushed his cart through Deck 7 during the night cycle. The corridors were quiet. Most of the crew slept. A young Kalori named Remy followed 3 steps behind him, looking bored. Remy had been assigned to supervise Danny. The official reason was to ensure the human did not damage sensitive equipment. The real reason, Danny suspected, was that Remy had annoyed someone important. "Must we go so slowly?" Remy asked. "Good cleaning takes time," Danny said. He stopped at a wall panel near the engineering section. Something had been bothering him for weeks. A slight vibration in the floor. A smell like burnt copper. Little things that most people would never notice. Danny opened the panel and looked inside. "What are you doing?" Remy demanded. "You are not authorized to access internal systems. Just checking something." Behind the panel, Danny found a junction where several pipes met. The metal had a strange pattern on it. Greenish spots spreading outward like a disease. He had seen this before, long ago. His uncle's fishing boat had developed the same kind of corrosion before it sank in Lake Erie. "There's a problem here," Danny said. "What kind of problem?" "Corrosion. These pipes are breaking down from the inside." Remy looked at the pipes without interest. The ship's monitoring systems would detect any damage. "Your concern is noted, but unnecessary." Danny frowned. He had reported problems before. A loose cable on Deck 4. A crack in a viewport seal on Deck 12. Each time, he was told the same thing. The monitoring systems would catch it. The engineers knew better than some human cleaner. But Danny had worked with machines his whole life. He knew what rut looked like. "I want to report this to engineering," he said. Remy sighed. "If you insist." They found Chief Engineer Malera in the main engineering bay. She was brilliant by any standard, trained at the finest academies in Kalori space. She also had no patience for interruptions. "What is it?" she asked without looking up from her console. "The human wishes to report a maintenance issue," Remy said. Danny stepped forward. "Ma'am, there's corrosion in a secondary coolant junction on Deck 7. I think it might be spreading." Malera finally looked at him. Her golden eyes held no warmth. "The coolant systems are monitored by artificial intelligence networks that track every molecule flowing through this ship. If there was corrosion, we would know. With respect, I saw it with my own eyes. The pattern suggests it's been growing for months." "Your eyes." Malera turned back to her console. "I have sensors accurate to 1 part per billion. Return to your duties, human. Clean something." Remy pulled at Danny's arm. "Gulme, you tried." Danny allowed himself to be led away, but his stomach felt tight with worry. He had seen too many machines fail because someone ignored the warning signs. In his experience, technology was never as perfect as the people who built it believed. 3 days later, he was mopping the floor in a cargo bay when the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed in every corridor. The ship shuddered like a wounded animal. Danny grabbed his cart to keep from falling as the artificial gravity flickered. Remy burst through a doorway, scales pale with fear. "The reactor cooling system has failed. We are drifting." They say we might all die. Danny closed his eyes for a moment. Then he started pushing his cart toward engineering. Where are you going? Remy called after him. To see if I can help. Help? You are a janitor. Danny kept walking. Sometimes I was exactly what you needed. Smoke filled the corridors of the Sovereign Light. Crew members ran in every direction, their usual calm replaced by raw fear. Danny pushed through them all, his cleaning cart rattling over deck plates that shook beneath his feet. He had never moved this fast on a ship before. For 8 months, he had been slow and careful, invisible and quiet. Now he ran like his life depended on it. Because it did, Remy caught up with him near the engineering section. You cannot go in there. Emergency protocols say all non-essential personnel must stay in their quarters. I'm going anyway. They will arrest you. Then they can arrest me after I see what's happening. The doors to main engineering stood open. Inside was chaos. Engineers rushed between consoles, shouting numbers and warnings at each other. Sparks flew from a damaged panel. The air smelled like that same burnt copper Danny had noticed 3 days ago, only 100 times stronger. Chief Engineer Malera stood at the central display, her scales dark with stress. She was arguing with a tall Kalori whose uniform carried more medals than Danny had ever seen, Admiral Sorathon, commander of the entire Third Fleet. Danny had only seen him twice before, always from a distance. Up close, the Admiral looked like a creature not used to hearing bad news. Explain this to me again, Vaughn demanded. How does a Kalori flagship simply lose its cooling system? Corrosion, Malera said, her voice strained. It spread through the secondary junctions and reached the primary coolant lines. By the time the sensors detected it, the damage was already critical. And why did the sensors not detect it sooner? Malera hesitated. Danny saw something flicker across her face. Shame, perhaps, or memory. The corrosion was in a junction that falls between sensor grid zones, she said. A blind spot. We never anticipated failure in that specific location. Danny's heart sank. The exact junction he had reported. The exact problem he had warned about. So fix it, the Admiral said. Replace the damaged parts. We cannot. Malera pulled up a diagram on the display. The parts that failed are specialized junction connectors. They're designed to be replaced only at a space dock with proper facilities. We do not carry spares. No ship does. They were never supposed to fail. How long until the reactor goes critical? 6 hours. Perhaps less. The Admiral went very still. Around him, the noise of the engineering bay seemed to fade. When he spoke again, his voice was quiet. For 1,000 souls on this ship, how many can the escape pods save? Approximately 2,000 if launched in order. And the nearest rescue vessel, 14 hours away. Admiral Vaughn closed his eyes. His hands gripped the edge of a console until his knuckles turned white. Then he opened his eyes and looked at Malera with an expression that mixed fury and despair. You are telling me that the greatest warship in Kalori history is going to explode because of corroded pipes? That there is nothing we can do? That half my crew will die? Malara's voice broke slightly. Admiral, I have examined every possibility. The junction cannot be repaired without the proper equipment. The replacement parts do not exist on this ship. I have run every simulation, so run them again. It will not change the physics. Sir, I am sorry. It cannot be fixed. The Admiral's roar echoed off the walls. IT can't be fixed. He swept his arm across a console, sending tools and data pads crashing to the floor. 200 years I have served. 200 years without defeat. And I will die because of rust. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Danny pushed his cleaning cart forward. The squeak of its wheels cut through the silence like a knife. Every head turned toward him. A human in a janitor's uniform, standing in the middle of a crisis that would kill 4,000 people. Excuse me, Danny said. His voice was calm. I think I can fix it. The Admiral stared at him. Confusion replaced the anger on his face. Who is this? Remy hurried forward, grabbing Danny's arm. I apologize, Admiral. This is a cleaning worker. He is not supposed to be here. I will remove him immediately. Wait. Admiral Vaughn stepped closer, looking down at Danny with eyes that seemed to see him for the first time. Did you say you can fix it? I think so. Yes, sir. The Admiral's laugh was bitter. A janitor. A human janitor thinks he can solve a problem that my chief engineer cannot. Danny met his gaze. 3 days ago, I reported the corrosion in that junction. No one listened. I've been fixing machines my whole life. Maybe I can fix this one too. The engineering bay fell silent again. All eyes moved between the human janitor and the Kalori Admiral. The Vaughn's expression was unreadable. And if you fail? Danny shrugged. Then we're no worse off than we are right now. Every engineer in the room stared at Danny like he had grown a second head. The Kalori were not used to being challenged, especially not by a species they considered barely civilized, and certainly not by a janitor. Admiral Vaughn's expression shifted between insult and interest. You have 5 minutes to explain yourself before I have you thrown the brig. Danny nodded. Fair enough. He walked toward the main display, his worn boots clicking against the metal floor. Chief Engineer Malera moved to block him, but the Admiral raised a hand. She stepped aside, her golden eyes burning with resentment. May I? Danny asked, gesturing at the controls. Malera gave a stiff nod. Danny pulled up the diagram of the cooling system. He had never used a Kalori interface before, but the basics were similar enough to the industrial systems he had worked with on Earth. Pipes were pipes. Pumps were pumps. The principles did not change just because you were in space. The problem is here, he said, pointing at the damaged junction. 3 primary coolant lines meet at this connector. When the connector failed, coolant stopped flowing to the reactor. We know this, Malera said coldly. The question is how to repair a connector we cannot replace. You don't repair it. You go around it. Danny traced a different path on the display. The ship has an emergency fire suppression system, right? Uses high-pressure liquid to flood compartments and kill fires. Yes. What does that have to do with anything? Those pipes run all through the ship. Some of them pass within 20 meters of the reactor housing. If we disconnect them from the fire system and connect them to the coolant system instead, we can bypass the damaged junction entirely. The room went quiet. Engineers exchanged glances. Malera shook her head. That is impossible. The fire suppression system operates at different pressures. The materials are not rated for reactor coolant. The connections would not be compatible. You would destroy both systems. Maybe, Danny admitted, but I'm not talking about a permanent fix. Just something that holds together long enough to reach a space dock. How far away is the nearest one? 3 days at emergency speed, someone answered. 3 days then. We need a patch, not a perfect solution. Admiral Vaughn leaned forward. And you believe this patch would work? On Earth, we call it a jury rig. When something breaks and you don't have the right parts, you use whatever you've got. I've seen engines held together with wire and tape run for weeks. It's ugly, but it works. Wire and tape, Malera repeated with disgust. We are not primitive humans working on primitive machines. This is a Starship reactor. One mistake, and we all die in nuclear fire. One mistake, and we all die anyway, Danny said. At least this way we're trying something. The two stared at each other. Danny was half Malara's height and had none of her education. But he had something she lacked, the freedom to think outside the rules. Captain Yinny stepped forward. Danny had barely noticed her before. She was older than the other officers, with a weariness in her eyes that suggested she had seen many crises. Chief Engineer, is what the human proposes mathematically possible? Malera hesitated. Her fingers moved across the console, running calculations. The seconds stretched long. The pressure differential is within tolerance, she finally admitted. If we reinforce the connections and monitor constantly for leaks, the coolant could theoretically flow through the fire suppression lines. Theoretically, there are dozens of points where the system could fail. The materials were never designed for this use. The temperatures alone could cause degradation within hours. But might work, Captain Yinny's pressed. Malera looked pained. It might? I estimate perhaps a 30% chance of success. Admiral von Strichtrenet. 30% is better than 0. But I will not risk this ship on the word of a cleaning worker. He turned to Danny with hard eyes. If I allow you to attempt this, and you fail, you will be personally responsible for every death. That burden will follow you for whatever time you have left. Do you understand? Danny thought about his father, who had worked 40 years in the same factory and never once called in sick. About his mother, who had raised 4 children on a nurse's salary and never complained. About a lifetime of doing what needed to be done, regardless of the odds. I understand, he said, but I need access to maintenance supplies, and I need people who can follow simple directions. The Admiral studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Chief Engineer, give this human whatever he requires. If he succeeds, we all live. If he fails, it will not matter anyway. Malera looked like she had swallowed something bitter. Yes, Admiral. Danny picked up his cleaning cart. I'll need some things from here, too. And I'll need that young officer who's been following me around. Remy's eyes went wide. Me? You know where everything on this ship is. That makes you useful. Come on. Danny headed for the door, pushing his cart ahead of him. Behind him, he heard Malara's voice, quiet and uncertain. Human, what is your name? He paused. Danny Kowalski. I will remember that name, one way or another. Maintenance Bay 4 was filled with the strangest collection of objects Danny had ever gathered in one place. Pipes from the fire suppression system, sealing compounds from engineering, valve controls pulled from damaged airlocks, and half the contents of his cleaning cart. 3 calorie stood with him. Remy, of course, looking nervous but determined. 2 junior engineers, named Parrell and Shin, who had volunteered against Chief Millar's orders. They were young and curious, which was exactly what Danny needed. All right, Danny said, rolling up his sleeves. Here's how this works. I'm going to tell you to do things that might seem strange. Don't ask why. Just do them exactly as I say. We have 4 hours left. Questions? Parrell raised a scaled hand. What qualifications do you have for this work? I fixed factory machines for 20 years. I rebuilt my neighbor's car engine when I was 16. I once kept a water heater running with nothing but coat hangers and rubber bands. Danny shrugged. Good enough. The engineers exchanged uncertain looks. Then Shin picked up a cutting tool. Tell us what to do. Danny started with the pipes. The caloric fire suppression lines were thick and well-made, designed to last centuries. He had them cut into precise lengths and stripped down to clean metal at the ends. Shin, take that sealing compound and coat every connection point. Thick layers. Don't be shy. This compound is meant for atmospheric seals, not coolant systems. It'll hold. Trust me. While Shin worked, Danny turned to the most unusual part of his plan. From his cleaning cart, he pulled out several containers of industrial cleaning solution. The labels marked them as heavy-duty degreasers. The bottles, Remy said. You want to use cleaning supply bottles? They're pressure-rated, meant to be loaded into spray systems and used at high force. They'll work as expansion chambers to regulate the flow. Parrell shook his head. This is madness. Probably. Keep working. The hours passed in focused silence. Danny moved between stations, guiding each person through their tasks. He spoke in simple terms, avoiding technical language. Cut here. Seal that. Connect this piece to that piece that he hummed while he worked, an old song his mother used to sing. The Kalori found it strange, but they said nothing. The humans' hands moved with a confidence that was hard to argue with. Chief Engineer Malera arrived halfway through. She stood in the doorway for 10 minutes, watching without speaking. Danny pretended not to notice her. Finally, she stepped forward and picked up a sealing tool. The flow junction you're building needs reinforcement. The pressure will be highest at this point. Danny nodded. Show me what you do. Malera worked alongside him for the next hour. She never admitted that his plan was good. She never apologized for dismissing him before. But she helped, and that was enough. Admiral Vaughn came twice to check on progress. The first time, he looked at the growing assembly with open disgust. Pipes held together with sealant and cable ties. Cleaning supply containers bolted to the main frame. Valve handles wrapped in tape for better grip. This is what will save my flagship, he demanded. Garbage and improvisation? Danny did not stop working. Sometimes garbage is all you need, sir. And improvisation is just another word for problem solving. The second time Vaughn appeared, only 90 minutes remained on the countdown. The bypass system was complete, a twisted mass of pipes and containers that looked like something from a junkyard. Will it work? The Admiral asked. Only one way to find out. Malera run the diagnostic. The chief engineer's fingers flew across her portable console. Numbers appeared on the screen. Her expression shifted from doubt to confusion to something that might have been wonder. The pressure calculations are within acceptable range. Temperature tolerance is marginal but sufficient. If the seals hold, the coolant should flow. If, Vaughn repeated, there are no guarantees. But mathematically, this should work. Danny wiped his hands on his pants. They were shaking slightly, but his voice stayed steady. Then let's connect it to the main system. The next 30 minutes were the longest of his life. Parrell and Shen worked the manual connections while Malera monitored every reading. Danny watched the improvised components, looking for any sign of failure. The final connection was made with 47 minutes to spare. Activating bypass, Malera announced. Coolant flow initiating. For 17 seconds, nothing happened. Alarms continued to blare. Warning lights flashed red. Then, one by one, they began to turn green. Coolant is flowing, Malera said, her voice hushed. Temperature is dropping. Pressure is stable. Danny let out a breath he had been holding for hours. Around him, the Kalori stared at the ugly, beautiful machine they had built together. Then Shin pointed at a junction near the reactor housing. Seal failure. We're losing pressure. Danny looked. A thin spray of coolant was escaping from one of the improvised connections. Small now, but growing. Everyone stepped back. He said he reached in his cleaning cart and pulled out a rubber plunger. Remy blinked. What are you going to do with that? Danny smiled. Watch and learn. Danny cut the rubber head from the plunger in one smooth motion. The thick, flexible material was designed to create airtight seals against drains and pipes. On Earth, it was used to unclog toilets. Here, it might save 4,000 lives. The leak was growing. Coolant sprayed from the failing junction in a fine mist that hissed where it touched metal. Danny moved toward it without hesitation. Human, stop, Malera shouted. That coolant is toxic. Direct exposure will burn your skin. Then I'll be quick. He grabbed the rubber disc with one hand and a tube of sealing compound with the other. The spray hit his forearm, and he felt an immediate burning sensation, like touching a hot stove. He ignored it. Working fast, Danny pressed the rubber over the leak. The flexible material molded itself around the pipe, covering the gap. He squeezed sealing compound around the edges, creating a bond between rubber and metal. The spray stopped. Pressure stabilizing, Parrell reported. The seal is holding. Danny stepped back, cradling his burned arm. The skin was red and already beginning to blister. But he was smiling. The rubber can handle higher temperatures than the standard seals, he explained. It was made for industrial use back on Earth, designed to work in factory conditions that would melt most plastics. Malera stared at the improvised patch. A toilet implement saved my reactor. Not yet. The next 3 days will tell us if it really worked. Admiral Vaughn had watched the entire scene from the doorway. He said nothing as Danny wrapped his burned arm with bandages from a first aid kit. He said nothing as Malera confirmed that all readings were now within safe ranges. Finally, he spoke. The ship will proceed to Space Dock 7 at maximum sustainable speed. Chief Engineer, I want constant monitoring of this bypass system. Any fluctuation, any concern at all, I want to know immediately. Yes, Admiral. Vaughn turned to Danny. You, come with me. They walked through the corridors of the Sovereign Light in silence. The emergency lights had returned to normal. Crew members passed them, staring at the strange sight of their Admiral walking alongside a human janitor with a bandaged arm. Vaughn led Danny to an observation deck near the front of the ship. Through the wide windows, stars stretched into infinity. Somewhere ahead, invisible at this distance, was the space dock that represented their only hope. Why did you do it? Vaughn asked. Danny frowned. Do what, sir? Risk yourself. You could have stayed silent in that engineering bay. You could have evacuated with the others. Instead, you stepped forward and offered to fix a problem that our best engineers could not solve. What? Danny thought about the question for a long moment. Where I come from, You don't walk away from a problem you can fix. Doesn't matter if it's your job or not. Doesn't matter if anyone thanks you, even when you might die trying, especially then. I learned that from my father. He worked in the same factory his whole life. Never made much money, never got famous. But when something broke, he fixed it. That was just who he was. Vaughn turned to face him. The Admiral's silver-blue scales seemed to glow in the starlight. I declared your solution impossible. I was wrong. You weren't wrong about the engineering. Why build out there is ugly and dangerous and it might still fail. You were wrong about who could solve the problem. Because you were a janitor. Because I see things differently. Your engineers are brilliant. They know more about reactor systems than I'll ever learn. But they're trained to think inside certain lines. Sometimes you need someone who doesn't even know where the lines are. The 3-day journey to Space Dock 7 was tense. Danny barely slept. He stayed near the bypass system, watching for signs of failure, making small adjustments whenever readings drifted toward dangerous levels. Remy brought him food and kept him company. Other crew members stopped by too, curious about the human who had saved their lives. They asked questions about Earth, about his family, about how he had learned to fix things. Danny answered them all. For the first time in 8 months, he was visible on the morning of the 3rd day. The Sovereign light limped into Space Dock 7. Repair crews boarded immediately, rushing to stabilize the damaged systems. Danny led them to the bypass assembly that a senior Kalori engineer stood staring at it for a full minute. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something that looked almost like admiration. "This is the ugliest thing I have ever seen," he said, "and also the most beautiful. Who built this?" "I did," Danny said. "With help." The engineer shook his head slowly. "You should not be alive. None of you should be alive. But here you are. Here we are." 2 hours later, Danny was summoned to the bridge. He arrived still wearing his janitor's uniform, still carrying the cart that had provided so many crucial tools. The entire bridge crew stood at attention. Admiral Vaughn waited at the center of the room. His medals gleamed in the overhead lights. His face was unreadable. "Approach," he commanded. Danny walked forward, his worn boots echoing on the polished floor. He stopped 3 paces from the Admiral and waited. Vaughn performed a gesture Danny had never seen before. A deep bow, hands crossed over his chest, held for several seconds. Remy's sharp intake of breath told Danny it meant something important. "That is the acknowledgement of equals," Malero whispered from nearby, usually reserved for other admirals. "Vaughn Strichtrenet. Danny Kowalski, you have done what I declared impossible. I was wrong to dismiss you. I was wrong to overlook you. On behalf of this crew and the Kalori fleet, I offer my deepest respect." Danny nodded slowly. "Thank you, Admiral." He meant it. 2 weeks after the crisis, Danny Kowalski stood in the Admiral's private office and tried not to laugh. The Kalori had offered him everything. A commission as an officer in the 3rd Fleet. A salary increase of 400%. Private quarters instead of the small maintenance room he had been using. Full citizenship in the Kalori Compact with all the rights and privileges that came with it. "You would be the first human to hold such a position," Admiral Vaughn explained. "A consultant to our engineering division. Your insights would shape the way we approach problems throughout the fleet." Danny looked at the documents spread across the desk. They were written in formal Kalori script, but Remy had translated the important parts for him. It was a generous offer. More than generous. Life-changing. "I appreciate this, Admiral. More than I can say. But I have to decline." Vaughn's scales flickered with surprise. "Decline? Why?" "Because I'm not an engineer. You proved otherwise when you saved this ship." "No, sir. I proved that sometimes you need a different way of looking at things. But that doesn't make me qualified to sit in meetings and write reports and argue about protocols." Danny shook his head. "That would drive me crazy within a week." "Then what do you want?" Danny had thought about this for 14 days. The answer had come to him while he was mopping floors on Deck 7, in the same corridor where he had first noticed the corrosion that almost killed them all. "I want to keep doing what I do. Walking the ship, noticing things, fixing what needs fixing." He paused, but maybe with a bit more authority to report problems directly. And maybe someone would actually listen next time. Vaughn leaned back in his chair. You wish to remain a janitor? The title doesn't matter to me. What matters is the work. For a long moment, the Admiral said nothing. Then something strange happened. He smiled. Captain Yinny suggested you might say something like this. She proposed a compromise. You would retain your current duties, but with full access to all ship systems. You would report directly to her, outside the normal chain of command. Any concerns you raise would be investigated immediately. And I keep my card, if that is what you wish. Danny smiled back. That's what I wish. The news of what happened on the Sovereign Light spread faster than anyone expected. Within a month, the story of the human janitor had reached every corner of the Galactic Compact. Species who had barely heard of Earth were suddenly asking questions about the strange people from that dangerous little planet. Other fleets began requesting human consultants, not engineers or scientists, but practical problem solvers who could see what others missed. Earth's government was confused by the sudden demand, but happy to provide candidates. Danny stayed on the Sovereign Light. He turned down interview requests and declined to pose for official portraits. He preferred to remain in the background, where he had always been most comfortable. 6 months after the crisis, he pushed his cart through Deck 7 during the night cycle. Much had changed. Crew members greeted him by name now. They stopped to tell him about strange sounds or odd smells or equipment that did not seem quite right. Remy walked beside him, no longer a supervisor but a student and friend. The young Kalori had requested a permanent assignment to Danny's team, citing a desire to learn human approaches to problem solving. There are 17 more requests for tours of the bypass assembly, Remy reported. Engineers from 4 different species want to see how you constructed it. Tell them I'm busy. You are mopping floors. Exactly. Busy. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Danny stopped near the cargo bay. He knelt down and placed his hand flat on the deck plates. Hand me that scanner, he said. Remy passed it over. What do you feel? Vibration. Very slight. Probably nothing. Danny ran the scanner across the floor, studying the readings. Probably something. Should I alert engineering? Not yet. Let me check behind that panel first. Remy watched as Danny pulled out his tools and began removing the wall panel. The older man hummed while he worked, the same song he always hummed. The tune had become familiar to Remy, a sign that everything was normal, that the ship was in good hands. Danny, Remy said, why did you really turn down the officer commission? Danny paused his work to think about the question. My father once told me that everyone has a place where they fit best. Some people belong in command centers, making big decisions. Some people belong in laboratories, inventing new things. And some people belong in the spaces between, keeping everything running. And you belong in the spaces between. I belong wherever something needs fixing. Danny pulled the panel free and peered inside. And something always needs fixing. He found the problem an hour later. A small crack in a support strut, invisible to sensors, growing slowly toward a critical junction. He reported it to Captain Yennies, who dispatched a repair team immediately. The next morning, Danny was back on his route. He passed through Deck 7 and Deck 8 and all the other decks that made up his territory. He cleaned floors and wiped consoles and emptied waste bins, and he watched. Always watching. The ship was 4,000 souls, crossing the darkness between stars. Among them was one human janitor who had learned a simple truth. Sometimes the most important person on a ship is the one who notices what everyone else ignores. Danny smiled and pushed his cart forward. There was always more work to do.